You are listening to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss our RC adventures.
Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss the ups and downs of the new RC Flyer. Join your hosts, Michael and Jay, as they take flight at the park. Now on with the show.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast. I'm Michael from Arizona, and with me always are my good friends,
Jay from the hills of Texas.
And AK Mike in Texas.
Well, welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast, guys. We are into the new year. Mike, welcome back to our episode. We
Thank you.
understand you were out cruising the Caribbean, I think.
I was cruising San Juan, St. Thomas. Yeah,
Very nice.
Tortola.
Well,
It was
welcome
good.
back.
Yeah.
Good. Well, welcome back. Well, today is a wonderful episode on 12/31 of 2019. That was the end of last year. The FAA published a notice of intent rule, or a notice of rulemaking for the remote identification of unmanned aircraft systems.
You made that sound so cheery, Mike. I didn't
I'm
quite take it
I'm
as
just
being
gonna
as
say,
cheery.
Yeah.
Yeah, I go with AK Mike. Ugh.
Well, we are in the formal comment time frame, which basically lasts until March 2nd of 2020. So by the time this comes out, you're only going to have 40 days or so to make comments. We're going to talk a little bit about it today. I know there's a lot of videos out on YouTube and a lot of people making comments, and some, people talking about the sky's falling, and some people talking about it's no big deal and enforcement action. But we're going to give our opinion, and I'll just start out the podcast by saying that everything you hear on this podcast is opinions of the hosts.
Very much so.
I would suggest that if you listen to us and you haven't already gone out and kind of gotten into it, that you should read at least some of the proposed rulemaking. You can find it on the federalregister.gov. If you just Google, remote identification of unmanned aircraft systems, you should come up with it. And then if you haven't already, make a comment, because I think there's a lot of problems that we can talk about, and I think the intent is there, but maybe the way the administration is going about it might be a little bit hasty. So anyway, having said all that, what do you think?
I just want to say before we start that if you are someone who's having sleeping problems, this is the perfect document for you. Because it'll put you to sleep. I swear, it lulls you into the sense of, this is so nice. Everything will be hunky dory. It is very
it's definitely
long.
an insomniac cure. If you have insomnia, you definitely read this. It'll cure
Holy
it.
smokes.
Yeah, but the sad thing is this is the type of stuff that you can't be sleeping on. Or
Correct.
else you're going to wake up and find that you can't fly, you can't go outside, fly a kite, you can't even blow up a balloon without having a remote, access transponder on your balloon. It's ridiculous.
Right. Well, I will tell you that I've kind of gone through, the majority of it several times, watched several people, talking about this and how it's going to affect us and, what's going on. There are, I'm trying to think how many, there are at least 24 different chapters or whatever they call them, different types. It's obviously was written by a lawyer because that's the way these things are done, right? They're proposed. It's a rule. They're hundreds of pages long. But inside all of that, you have to kind of go in and pick through what is important. And this is one of the statements that was inside these hundreds of pages that I think, in my eyes, is one of the most important ones.
What's that?
And it says in Chapter C, blah, blah, blah. You can kind of go look it up. But anyway, it basically says, under those proposed rules, the vast majority of unmanned aerial systems would require to have remote identification capability. The FAA envisions that upon full implementation of this rule, no unmanned aircraft weighing more than 0.055 pounds will be commercially available. That is not either a standard remote identification UAS or a limited remote identification UAS. Now, the reason I bring that up is because in this particular sentence, and I'm not a lawyer, but I have lawyer friends, this particular sentence basically says that every manufacturer out there is going to have to comply, or their product will not be commercially available. So that means everything is made in China. If China decides not to do this, or if a manufacturer says, yeah, we're not going to put this remote ID system in there, then technically the government is saying then they will no longer be able to sell airplanes or
right.
Whatever.
And on top of that, depending on whether it's a kit or the company made it, if it's not one of their approved, I'm making air quotes nobody can see, it's not one of the approved manufacturers, it's not going to be allowed.
That's what I'm saying.
To fly as well.
So in an attempt to, this is an attempt basically to limit production of these. And all of the stuff that you read about how they're going to, do this technology and everything, ultimately it's a control issue, right? It's very difficult to control 4 million drones. And I really don't like, and this is just my personal opinion, but I don't like to lump in drones and RC aircraft into the same group. Because drones, especially those produced by Mavic or what's the other company you mentioned, Mike? DJI, they already have systems in place that do this remote ID. You've got GPS, you've got computers inside it. They can send them out, bring them back. All of this data that these guys in the FAA proposed rulemaking is already currently available in the DJI stuff. But my little foam airplane that weighs 0.58 pounds that I fly in my front yard from RA Cores, now all of a sudden I'm going to have a big system on this thing that does a remote ID. Now you just negated the whole airplane. And I can tell you that, Jim over at RA Cores isn't going to change his whole manufacturing process to put this remote ID in there, and all of a sudden his $55 foamy or, whatever it is, goes up to $350. It's just not going to work.
Well, you're still going to be able to fly those aircraft, okay? Because, what they're proposing is like 3 different types of remote ID. They're going to have standard, and that kind of means like the drone's going to be broadcasting itself, right? Just like a regular transponder. Then they have limited, which means they're going to have a ground. You have to have a ground station, and your ground station is what's going to be transmitting, not only that you're identifying that you're flying in the area, but who you are and that where you are in relation to everything. And then you have UAS non-equipment. And that's kind of like where all the RC guys are going to fall into, right? So that means that we may not have the equipment on board, and we may not be, transmitting because, we're not a commercial type vehicle. And we're supposed to keep it, from what I kind of gathered from the rules, we're supposed to keep it under 400 feet, and we have to, keep a visual ID on the aircraft as it's flying, kind of like what we're doing now. Now, here's the other kicker, though. Is that we have to be, when you have a non-equipment aircraft or drone or whatever, you have to be flying in what they call a FRIA. And I think that stands for FAA Recognized Identified Area or Zone.
Correct. It's like a club.
So that means a club. Now, these guys, they're sneaky because there's more into this, right? So that's from the get-go. You look at this and you go, okay, well, that means you just fly at an AMA sanctioned site and you're good to go.
No.
Well, it's kind of sneaky because these FRIAs, they're going, when this law goes into effect, they're only going to allow 1 year to identify where the FRIAs are. Okay, so it doesn't have to be an AMA site. Let's say you wanted to use your club that's where they have the park. Well, I don't know what you have to go through in order to identify that club as a FRIA zone, but there may be a way to do that. Now, if you don't do it in a year, that's it. No more. They're never going to allow people. It's not like you can come back and say, I want to apply for this area to become a FRIA zone so I can fly my park flyers.
Nope.
After that year, if your area has not been identified as one of these zones, you're out. There's no more. They're not going to allow any more. Okay? And you know how it is with a lot of clubs around here. They're losing their sites left and right. How many clubs have you lost because, things changed and they couldn't fly there anymore? So once you lose that site, you can't open another site. Right? So once these FRIAs are established, once they go away, you don't get a chance to get more.
Yeah,
so,
but the good news is that some of these sites get lost because they're in a part of the land that's being taken over. Like in our particular case, they're building homes all the way around it. But if they finally get rid of that and now homes are over our site, I'm just going to come fly over it because that's an approved site right over that guy's front yard, right? I mean, the FAA is going to say
not the way I understood. Not the way I kind of understood it. Once the site is lost, or I see what you're getting at, but
being that's facetious. But if they approve it and then they go, oh well, this is an approved site, and they build a house right there, I'm flying in the guy's backyard.
I'm flying in the guy's house. Yeah. Like I said, the scary thing to me is that to me, I can see down the road they're just trying to eliminate anybody from flying and freeing up the airspace for commercial use. That's what this is saying to me.
Well, and that's what this basically is. They're trying to regulate the hobby out so that the commercial drone operators like Amazon and UPS and those guys who are now establishing, this package delivery type systems will have control of everything below 400 feet. So that's really where this is coming from. It's being pushed. But, everything that you said was valid. And it's very difficult because once again, I'm going to refer back to Jim over at RA Cores. I have a couple of those airplanes. They're super lightweight. They may weigh just an ounce or two over the 0.55 pounds because I'm using a heavier battery or whatever. And I have 5 acres of property that I can fly in. That's my property. And yet I don't really have to go above the roof line of my house with that airplane. I can fly it around without ever getting above the house. And now all of a sudden I'm in the words
You're a criminal.
In the words of the FAA, person and responsible.
You are a criminal.
You are either clueless, careless, or a criminal. So just because I'm flying in my front yard. By the way, I am none of those. I have worked in the airline industry for 30 years and been a professional pilot for a majority of those, probably at least 28 to 30 years. And I have never in my entire career come in contact with any type of RC airplane up where I'm at. But either civilian flying, personal airplanes or flying commercial airlines. I've never had an issue. And on the other side of that, I've never had an issue flying RC airplanes where I came a close call to an airliner or anything. So
now, how many birds have you hit?
How many birds have I hit? Oh,
yeah.
Shoot, probably, I don't know. I probably couldn't count them on two hands. Well over 10 or 12.
Right.
And
you think they put the bird... You'd think they'd put the bird crossing signs in a different place, not near the airport. I mean, come on.
Right. Well, in two separate cases, and I will tell you that the largest case that I had, I was flying a 737 down into Fort Lauderdale, and of course we crossed the coastal waterway right there, the intercoastal waterway, and we're about 400 feet in the air, maybe 500, just coming across, probably a little bit lower. And out of the corner of my eye, I could see this huge brown pelican. I felt so bad because, after flying for so long, you kind of start seeing angles. And I knew that at his speed, my speed, the angles that he was flying kind of 90 degrees to my flight path, that we were going to have an issue. One of us was not going to make it, and it wasn't going to be me. So about the time he crossed the nose of the airplane, we were about 190 knots. And it sucked him right through the the number one engine, the left engine. Of course, we landed. It didn't take the airplane down. It went right through the engine. It didn't hit the airplane. It just went right through the turbine blades. Totally destroyed the turbine blades, kind of fried a bunch of parts in the motor. But from the inside of the airplane, all I really saw was a movement of my gauges. The engine gauges kind of fluctuated, and then that was it. And I landed without incident. I mean, as far as when I say no incident, nothing happened to the airplane. Passengers smell like barbecued bird in the back, but
that must be terrible as it gets recirculated through the cabin.
It was awful. I mean, everybody was like, "What is that smell?"
What's cooking?
Burnt feathers. Now,
is that dinner?
Now the airplane was, yeah, it stunk. The airplane was grounded, and they did have to change out the engine. But I'm saying that the air, we didn't just ball up and die and go, "Oh my gosh," it didn't take us out. Now,
right.
A brown Pelican, not that I know off firsthand, but I guarantee you that thing probably weighed 10 pounds.
Yeah, it's a 10 to 15 pound bird,
to have
man.
weighed 10
Easy.
to 15 pounds. So I really, from a heartache standpoint, have a hard time that my, little flat foamies are going to be a menace to society, really, at point, 5.9 or 0.60 or whatever. But I do understand the background of why they're producing this, because there is a security risk, right? I mean, that's kind of part of this, is that they said that under the guise of the, Homeland Security, we don't want nefarious people coming in and trying to use these drones for nefarious reasons. However,
well, those guys are going to follow all the rules, so that's important, right? I mean,
right.
they're going to read the regulation and go, "Oh crap! You know what? We cannot do this drone with the explosives on it."
We had perfect plan.
FAA,
we were going to attack, but we break this rule. We can't do it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it works for the no smoking zones. You don't see smokers in no smoking zones. If I have a no.
I'm sorry. Are you like? Is that a serious statement? Because I don't think it is.
Not. I'm just saying. I'm going to make a no terrorist sign out. No trespassing. People just to jump over the fence. I see. I don't know. I mean, there's all kinds of things where people see the big, cross, the circle with the line through it, and people are constantly doing it. So, I don't know. I mean, the thing for me is that. Now that this has gotten out there, I do know that both the EAA, which is the real, the large airplane, or the Experimental Aircraft Association, which I'm also a member of, has gotten involved, and so has the AOPA.
Yeah.
And basically, it's because now what they're doing with us, they could do with larger airplanes. And it's very troublesome, I think. And this is where people are going to have to make this decision, that a lot of people are out there kind of like, "Oh, this is no big deal. It's just let them kind of do it. They'll never enforce it, blah, blah, blah." Well, yeah, they may never enforce it, or they may, it may be harder to enforce, but what it does is it's going to basically within 3 years limit anybody that's producing these, selling them, purchasing them, any of that type of stuff. So they basically wipe that out. It's not going to be that big of a jump to start wiping general aviation out, or balloons, or, paragliders, or any of that kind of thing. And so eventually, I think like anything else, this is, one of those things that's going to be very difficult, but I think it might be a springboard to other things. And that's really where people need to get involved in this. Once again, if you haven't made, some sort of a reference to, or an attempt to go out and, share your comments, I will tell you that on the comment section already, there has only been, this is amazing to me, but there has only been 5,428 public comments.
Right.
Now, there's 4 million drones out there. They should have 4 million comments. Literally 4 million comments. But instead,
part of the problem, I think,
of that. What's that?
Right. I think part of the problem with this is, once again, there you have like, your FPV guys, so this is a big concern for them, right? If, for how they're going to be affected, where they're going to be able to fly, et cetera, et cetera. Then you just have, just think about the people who aren't members of a club, aren't, we happen to be, but, mom and pop living out in the middle of Wyoming, they bought one of these things for the kid. Kids learn how to do it. He has one, but he doesn't know anything about this. That's the problem. That's what I'm fearing is that, all these people, grandfathers, grandparents buying things for kids, and now all of a sudden they go out one day and now you're a criminal.
So that's a good point. You're only going to be a criminal for the first 3 years. Because after that, right, from what we talked about earlier, the list of items that's going to be required for the manufacturer, they're basically going to, the FAA will be able to approve or disapprove the manufacturer.
Right.
So they're basically going to say, yeah, we don't want any type of, manned aircraft or, we don't want any type of unmanned aircraft that, little junior can buy off the shelf at Walmart. That's gone. Because that that size and even like I said, even if it's just about a pound, that size is not going to be able to put anything remote ID type system in there, and therefore they're going to say you can't sell it. The other thing is, I think from a cost perspective, in order to have these systems, it's going to drive the cost of this particular hobby way over the board. And you're not going to have grandma and grandpa going in and spending $5,000, on an ID.
Well, think about it. The cost of just getting into the hobby is already high. I mean, it is and it isn't. But I mean, you think about it. You join the AMA. Right, sure. It's $75 there. You buy the plane, you buy your radio. Although that stuff has dropped dramatically, in years. But still, you have to buy all that stuff. Then you join a club. After you get your AMA membership, then you join a club. You may be out a couple $100 there, that type of thing. So now you're talking about with this, remote, ID stuff, and they're talking about using your cell, to identify that, or for your base station that you're flying with your identifier. But then it has to be continuous. So that means you have to pay the service, and that's $30 or $50 a year. Plus your cell phone and minutes, your cell minutes, for paying for that to broadcast that stuff. I'm just saying, the costs are just getting compounded for some, for a problem that isn't there. And that's my biggest problem is that it'd be different. Yeah. I was reading through some of the stuff there and they were talking about one of the main reasons that they were pushing for all this stuff so much was like because of Gatwick, because of the drone incident at Gatwick.
But yet they haven't even had the paper bag incident.
Right, but they don't even have a picture of the supposed, I'm making air quotes, folks, you can't see them, of the supposed drone that was flying all over the field for hours, but they have, now in this day of cameras, especially, in the UK, they don't have one picture of this thing, right? And as Mike was saying, the paper bag
It was a plastic bag, actually. But
right.
There were two separate incidences. The first one was the airline guy that said, oh my gosh, I almost got hit by a drone, and they traced it down, and it was actually a paper bag. I mean, a plastic sack. And then the other one, they chased around a drone because somebody said they thought they saw it, when in reality there was nothing there ever.
Right.
And that's why he eluded them for supposedly this genius of an individual was able to elude these guys for almost 6.5 hours.
Criminal mastermind,
exactly.
Mind you.
Yeah. And they wound up finding a guy, but the guy actually, and this was where I didn't agree with it, but they tried to prosecute this guy for being the guy, right, when he was given like a speech or something at the local college during the whole time.
Right.
But because he met all the requirements of the guy that, he had a drone, he had, quad stuff, he lived near the airport, blah, blah, blah. They went and tagged this guy. And my problem with this is, realistically having, kind of been in the airline side and the private aircraft side, I will tell you that Mike flies a paraglider, if I'm not mistaken. And he flies that thing. Well, I mean, Mike, you don't have to register the paraglider or anything, do you?
No, I don't have to register my paramotor at all.
I guess not.
that I'm aware of. So
And you don't have to have an N number. You don't have to pay a yearly registration. You don't have to do any of that stuff.
It's considered experimental aircraft, I believe, and also like I don't think the ultralights have to have an N number, if I'm not mistaken. And it's in that ultralight category, is my understanding. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't even play one on TV. But I just I'm not all sure on the different bits of that. But at this point, I don't have to have one that I know of, that I'm aware of.
Okay, so you get to fly around, and you have the ability to fly, from point A to point B in a paramotor without any constraints. Yet, in order for me to stand in my front yard and fly a little foamy, all of a sudden I have to fall under this entire, 7,249 page document that has become, oh, guess what? We're going to limit, and you have to comply to all this stuff. That's my problem.
I think the only difference between what you're talking about and me is I have to put myself at risk while I'm flying around. So
well, I do too. I mean, as far as
not if you're standing on the ground, not if you're standing on the ground and you're flying your plane 400 feet away from you, you're not at risk.
Well, I can
the
tell
same
you
risk,
that
I should say.
Well, I can tell you I've hit myself with my own airplane and cut myself wide open, had to go to the hospital. So I probably would disagree with that, but I understand where you're going with it, and the fact that your life is on the line, right? So if something happened majorly with you, it could cost a human life. Well, if I'm flying
out of self-interest, I'm going to try to stay out of the way, right?
Right, but I mean, my risk is just as great. I think. Well, I mean, maybe not as great, but
I mean, let me just throw out a stupid example, Mike. So let's say you're flying an airplane and you're like, "Oh, I'm going to go chase this ultralight guy's aircraft around with my drone or my aircraft." Right? You're not putting yourself at risk to do that. You're putting them at risk because you're flying your aircraft around them. And if I flew towards your remote control airplane, I'm putting myself at risk, because if it happens to go through some strings or whatever it decides to do, in terms of damaging my prop, whatever, of course we know that isn't too catastrophic because I would just hopefully land in a nearby spot. But my point is, I'm preserving my self-interest as I fly, whereas when you're flying with a remote controlled airplane, you don't really have the same self-interest about your life that I do.
Well, that's true, but I mean, the whole point, at least in my mind, is there's more restrictions that I have, that supposedly here in a few years that we're going to have to go through as a hobbyist. Yet I can jump into an experiment.
Oh, it'll definitely will impact.
Yeah, as a paramotor pilot, it's going to probably bleed over.
No, I don't think
so. Right,
so.
exactly. Well, I'm just saying there's more restrictions on us than there is on a guy who wants to strap a parachute on with a motor, and buzz around the sky. There's less restrictions on him, but as opposed to me. And it's just maddening, that would be the case. But I kind of agree. I think it's gonna swallow everybody up as people like Mike get discovered, or if there's an incident that, somebody, let's just say, with a UPS drone that all of a sudden gets tangled up, or some paramotor guy complains about a UPS drone flying next to him or close by him. And they're going to go, what are these paramotors? You mean there's people flying around with parachutes on their back? Oh my gosh.
Right.
Well, here's another possible element that's, causing less concern for the paramotor community in that regard. There's less of us overall. You don't have, I've seen numbers now. I think the FAA said something like 1.6 registered remote control flyers out there that have registered during the period where they were making people register. And I heard somebody on a YouTube video say 8 million of them were sold, drones. Now, when they say that, I usually think quads when I hear that. So if it's 8 million plus whatever the aircraft are, that's a lot. Now, if you're looking at just raw numbers, because I know that 8 million aren't flying at every second of every day, just the number of paramotor flyers isn't that high. Probably talking a couple 100,000 max ever.
Yeah, well,
So-
I'm not worried about the paramotor guys flying into.
Well, my
an
point is
aircraft.
that
I'm
the
worried,
sheer
I'm saying
numbers.
now
We're
that
talking
once
about
the
sheer
drone
numbers here.
community gets. Yeah. No, but I'm just saying, I could just foresee here in the future when drones are just taking off, like I said, a UPS drone, and it comes near somebody or somebody, UPS complains. Oh my gosh, some guy with a parachute was flying past our drone. What the heck is that? He wasn't on any kind of transponder. What was that? Oh yeah, there's guys called paramotor guys. They're experimental pilots and things, but they don't have to do anything. Oh my gosh, we got to talk to Congress about that. I'm just saying, you guys will be next. You're next on the chopping block, and if you're even smaller,
and we're kind of getting off topic. I think when we're kind of chasing our tail with that, and you may be right, Jay, but initially in front of us is, in order to get to Mike, they got to go through us. That's the more I think critical thing, and inside the document, once again, I mean, the thing that really irritates me is that once again that we're dealing with a safety issue, right? That's what this was supposedly this is all done because of safety, and yet way down in the pages again, and when I was going through, I was highlighting the stuff that was kind of irritating to me. This particular, as you get down into it, where it talks about the reckless operation of, unmanned aircraft, it basically says that there are 6 supposed sightings per day that's reported to the FAA. 6 sightings a day. And how many drones were there, Mike? You said 4 or 8 million?
8 million, you said.
Yeah, it's anywhere from 1.6 million to 8 million.
Right. So there's 8 million of these things flying around, and they're getting 6 sightings a day, only 6. And out of those 6, they've only had 2 collisions. So they specify in their document that collisions with manned aircraft are relatively rare. There's only been 2 that they can identify. Now, this is the crazy thing once again, because they said that the government helicopter, it was a Army Black Hawk helicopter in New York City in September 2017, that basically collided with a manned drone, and they only knew that because I think it hit the side of the airplane, or hit the side of the helicopter, and one of the blades kind of stuck in or was hanging on their antenna. That's how they knew they got hit. Other than that, they never even knew it. The second one was a small twin engine passenger airplane. It was flying into Quebec City, and in October of 2017. So September and October, this is 2 months, right? That's it. And in all of those circumstances, the FAA says remote identification could have enabled an immediate identification of the UAS and enabled law enforcement to find the location of the control station, which we know is who? Me, because I'm at the controls.
Right.
For a near real-time response and investigation. That is what this law is for. In my eyes, this law isn't for safety. It isn't for, all the things that the FAA has kind of given us an idea about. This is nothing more than to provide a law enforcement track to someone when something happens. I think they are creating a problem that really doesn't exist. They're creating their own problem, right? They're saying we want a solution to this problem. Well, there isn't a
Good
problem.
idea, Fairy.
Exactly.
She came along with her wand. Pring. I have a good idea.
Exactly.
And they ran with it.
And so to me, if there are 4 million drones and only 2 accidents, not really accidents, because the airplanes didn't get hurt, they just got hit. So there are more car accidents than there are drone accidents.
Mike,
there are plenty
do you
of
know how
YouTube
many
guys out
bird
there that
strikes
talk
there
about
are?
this. There are thousands
Do you know how many bird
of
strikes
bird
there are?
strikes.
Yeah,
I couldn't tell you. There's thousands of them.
Yeah. I don't know. I
Way
just
more
find
than
that
I can count.
Yeah, I just find that inconsistency just hard to swallow.
Well, it is. I mean, when you look at it from a percentage standpoint, the percentages are so skewed. I mean, literally 2 out of 4 million, or 2 out of even 365 days, you have 2. And so, I mean, it's just, there's other problems that they have. They talk about the infrastructure, about how people fly over, stadiums, and how they fly over open air venues of concerts, and they do all of this stuff. And they are automatically jumping to the fact that this is malicious UAS activity, and it's designed to disrupt, gain media attention. It's a distinct threat and potential to inflict delays, fear, injuries, economic losses, infrastructure, shutdowns, public facility shutdowns. This is something that, once again, is not happening right now. It's not happening. It's the potential for this to happen. Right. So this whole law is based on something that, A, hasn't happened yet, and it's not necessarily a law. It's a proposed rulemaking. But it hasn't happened yet. It probably may or may not happen, and yet we're the ones that are being, looked at to say, hey, look, we're going to change the way that this goes because we can't identify who that guy is, and we want to know who he is. So to me, this is a big data collection. And if they are collecting data on me via the internet, and they are not keeping my data secret, right?
Oh, yeah, right.
Then that's breaking the law. So in my eyes, this law or the WISP proposal basically infringes on my right to secure.
I didn't even think about that because, for ham operators and stuff, yeah, sure, you have an identifier, all that kind of stuff, but they don't track when you're calling, when you're communicating, what equipment you're using, they're not recording any of that. But they're recording when you're flying, what freak you're flying on, where exactly you are, where you're flying over. What do you think, AK Mike?
So what also frustrates me, you talked about, Mike, near real time response. You can't even get near real time response for an ambulance to your house after you dial 911. How the heck do you expect really expect to implement near real time response on this sort of thing, let alone have the resources to manage the 8 million potentially flying drones every second of every day to manage that? I mean, if we have a drone flying day, what are they going to do? I mean, they're not going to be able to do anything. And all it will do was create more headache and more paperwork, which will cost us, the taxpayers, even more money to run the government that we're running today. I mean, it just seems so out of bounds from a implementation standpoint, let alone whether it's legal or not. Like, let's skip over the legal part of it and just say, how are you going to implement this? And you're not going to. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Okay, once again, that's one of those things is that, no, and I agree with you. And a lot of guys will step on it on that same, kind of step and say, well, this really isn't going anywhere because they're never going to be able to implement it. They're never going to be able to, get enough people to support it or doing that stuff. That's not the issue. That's a cheap way out of this, because you're not looking at the bigger picture. The bigger picture is the shutdown of all of this stuff while we get to that point. That's the bigger issue. They're giving us 3 years to get all of this stuff organized, and then that's it, right? That's the deadline, and then everything kind of just gets chopped there. So people are looking at it going, they'll never be, it'll never get put through. But at the same time, if it does, because nobody comments or nobody says, hey, we have an issue with this, not that the FAA is going to listen anyway, because they didn't on the last time. But, this is being pushed through as something that, this is probably one of the shortest proposed rulemaking times for comments I think I've ever seen.
I think I'm more talking about. I'm talking more about, for the taking the chance that I might be causing some issue, but the idea that there's going to be civil disobedience on this because it's so ridiculous. And so even let's assume they
no, I agree.
Get through all that stuff, and let's say that they pass all these rules, I just feel like, they're going to have such a level of disregard for this stuff that it's not going to be useful anyway.
Right, and in the same time, that's their ability to say, okay, look, what Mike's just said is correct, and we can't really, we don't have enough law enforcement, people to run around and do all this stuff. So right as of today, we're changing it, and we're just going to shut it down until we get to the point where we do have all that. That may never come. Having enough law enforcement to put all this stuff in place may never come. The systems that they're talking about may never come. They're relying on all that stuff to show up.
In the meantime, all the fields
fact.
Are shut down. All the other places are shut down. Nobody can go fly.
Right, exactly. In the meantime, we only approved 2 places. One of them is in Kansas. So everybody in the western states has to drive to Salinas, Kansas to fly your RC airplanes. And the other one is somewhere in southern tip of Florida out in the middle of the ocean. So those are the 2 approved areas. If you live close enough within 5,000 miles of that, you can make it. Good for you. It's very difficult, for me to see the positive side of this. And I know that, there's supposed to be a side of it, but I'm not really, fond of the way that they're kind of lumping everything in there. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, flying professionally for 30 years. I've been flying RC for well over 20 plus years. I've never had issues with either one of them, or coming together or combining. But what I have had issues with is someone tracking my data, right? I even turned it off on my phone because I don't like it when Apple does it either. But that's really what this is about. We're going to collect data on every drone operator, every aircraft owner, every kind of, unmanned aerial systems, so that if something nefarious happens, we can come after that individual and know where he's at. The problem is, nowhere in this document did they address the safety of my personal information that is now online and is now being transmitted in the airwaves to somewhere on the internet to a third party that's going to store this information, sell the information.
Turn around and sell it.
That I just don't get it. I mean, if all that information is going out and it's free for anybody, then what's to say that the guy driving down the road who hates drone operators doesn't look it up on his cell phone, find out where I live, and burn my house to the ground or do something nefarious to me? Now, am I being protected? Is the FAA going to come and say, hey, sorry about that? No. So until they can convince me that my information is being broadcast with some sort of a, cipher lock
encrypted,
on it where they
coded.
Exactly. And that's nowhere in this document did I see anything that talked about that.
Right. How long are they going to keep the information?
What are they going to do with it?
What are they going to do with it? Are they going to turn around and sell it to somebody so that they can use it to develop now you have to pay a tax. Let's say you're in New York City and they go,
Right.
Well, we noticed that all the drone operators fly from this location or over this airspace. So when you fly from that air or you launch or take off from that area, you have to pay a drone tax
Right.
to take off of there. I could just foresee that happening, right? Hey, you're operating in this one zone. So, gee whiz, we got all this information that says you guys are all housed in this one area, so we're going to tax everybody there.
Right. Well, supposedly they had working groups that got together and tried to, get all this information. But my problem is that, once again, nowhere did they release who was in the working group. And
Because you have the DAC, right? The
Correct.
Drone Advisory Commission or Consul
Correct.
or whatever.
Right.
Consular or whatever. And then ARC. There's a bunch of different ARCs within the FAA, but I think in this one it's like with the air carriers and somebody else in their ARC. But
Right.
you're right. So like the AMA is on the DAC, right? They're one of the members on the DAC, and I guess they have a bit of voting. They can vote a little bit, but part of the problem is, sure they're representing us, but how much do they actually get a vote? Are they really getting to vote, or once again, does Amazon and UPS do they have more rights, say so, and all this stuff. Nothing's explained as to how that board works and who has power,
right,
or who's in charge of the groups as they're talking this stuff out. It's kind of nebulous how it's all working.
Well, it's in the document somewhere. They talk about how they get together and they make decisions. But I am interested to see if every single one of those guys on this commission, other than the guys at the AMA, what are the other guys? Do they fly remote ID, remote control aircraft? Do they fly RC airplanes, or are they just people that are looking at us going, man, those guys are like a bunch of, gnats in the sky. We got to get rid of those.
Yeah, I think the latter.
Well,
we're stopping their
once
profits.
again, this is my personal opinion, but I really seriously think that Amazon and UPS. By the way, UPS did just get an approval by the FAA under a 135 certificate to fly packages with drones. Now, their problem is that they need core, that all that airspace below 400 feet to run these packages. So if all of us are in there flying around and they hit one of us, they're going to have to buy, Barry's new $15,000 jet. So,
right.
They don't want to do that. So their lobby money, I think, goes into the FAA's pocket and says, hey, look, we need to kind of thin these guys out so that the money that we spent developing this package delivery system doesn't go to waste. I really think
I have to talk about this for a second. I have to talk about this for a second because this is something that's been on my mind for a while with regard to UPS and those folks who want to deliver with a drone.
Sure.
The security on that is ridiculous in terms of bad. Because think about it. If I have all I need is to have a net. I'm standing next to my neighbor's house. This drone's coming in with a package I can see. I'm going to catch it. Or they talk about having commercial locations where these things land in a courtyard and then they get delivered locally out of that space, where they have these corridors of folks. What's going to stop people from taking advantage of that stuff? Cameras? Maybe. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like there's very much security in that regard. And so they're going to end up losing packages, or they're going to have failures in the air. The thing's going to drop out of the sky and hurt somebody or whatever, and they'll put an end to that stuff. So I really feel like that's an avenue, although promising, hasn't been proven. They've proved they can do it, but they haven't proven they can do it in a way that's not going to be impactful to everybody.
And I totally get what you're saying, and I think this is part of where this rulemaking is coming in, because they are in the stage where they got approval, but they're just not quite there yet, and they need to get out there and do some testing. And the ones that are in Colorado flying around and everybody's all worried about, I wouldn't put it past either a government contract or UPS or somebody that's doing the delivery package runs. And then nobody's saying anything because this rule is out there, and it helps them when they don't know who this guy, who these people are. But they need the area, and they need the area, this airspace cleared so they can do these tests. And I think that's what's driving some of this. I don't know for sure, but in my mind, that seems to be the logical thing, right? Is to say, man, I don't want to. Once again, I spent all this money getting this approved because it takes a lot of money to get something approved with the FAA, and now I need that airspace clear. Or at least somebody, that way I know where everybody is as I'm doing my testing to get these packages out there. I find it, both of you guys know that I was part of the Guinness Book of World Records attempt for the, lifting a little quad that weighed less than a pound, lifting the most weight. And we were out there all day watching this guy. And every time he tried to lift this package, something would happen and the quad would crash and die. And he would have to refix the quad. Having said all that, the quad would have to be some octocopter half the size of a car to be able to lift anything more than a pound or two, and then be able to fly a distance that it could deliver it. And like Mike said, what happens now if I see this package going through the air and I don't take my, shotgun or something and knock it out, or some kind of a net, gun and capture it? What are they going to do? Or if I just follow all these drones over to the package drop-off location, is there going to be a bunch of people standing around there going, "Oh, that's my package"? How do I know? How are you going to identify?
Yeah,
that?
I wonder if net guns are regulated right now. I mean, maybe I should start a net gun business.
I know, right?
And
we should.
maybe be a.
I could capture your package from the air. I don't know. And you're right. I mean, if I'm sending some unit that's expensive, like I have, things that I ship, and they could be several thousands of dollars, $6,000, $6,000 or $7,000 if I'm shipping. I'm not going to have that thing, even though it's lightweight. It's not going to, are they going to drop it from there? I mean, they don't insure the package. There's just a lot of things. I think these guys would be more suited to push this off until some of this stuff actually got figured out. When the company comes out with this remote ID system and they test it and they say, okay, well, this works and it only weighs 2 ounces, so I can put it in my foam airplane. I think that's the time when they should say, okay, we're coming out with the proposed rulemaking. You shouldn't come out with a rule that says, hey, 3 years down the road, when all this technology finally catches up with you, then this is going to go into effect.
Right. So quick question. So when they changed over, what am I trying to think? For the new aircraft that you're flying, and you like you said, since now you don't even have to talk to the tower for the most part, you sit there and just send text messages. I know there was a period of time when they were bringing that technology in, even though they had it earlier than that.
That is correct.
But it still took them. I want to say it was like 25 years, like 25 years. I mean, it took a long time. By the time they did the rulemaking, brought the technology online, tested it, did all the other stuff, and then okayed it. They just didn't do it in a year and said, "Oh, we're good to go." It took some time.
It didn't take 4 months, March 20th or whatever it is. Yeah. It actually, right. and I think the system you're talking about, and Mike asked me earlier before we started the podcast, ADSB is what it's called.
ADSB, yes, thank you.
In our case, it's ADS, and we don't have the B part, but it's ADS, which stands for Automated Dedicated Broadcasting, I think. And what it does basically for real aircraft, both for the commercial side and the private side, is it basically sends a signal out that basically says, this is my tail number, and this is my altitude, my airspeed, and this is the direction I'm going, and this is where I am, geographically located from a GPS. Same exact thing that the DJI Quad does, right? It says, here I am. You can look at it on your phone on a Google Maps and say, there it is. Now, the ADSB in and out are the two, right? ADSB in and out. So the in is basically means that now on my screen inside the airplane, I can see all the other people that are there. So if I'm flying a commercial airliner and I have a small airplane that's within, 5 or 6 miles, I can actually see them as an identified target, so I can maintain separation, or at least look in that direction and see if I can find the little guy and not run him over. Now, having said that, I don't have to have, the law says I have to have ADSB out. I don't have to have ADSB in. Why does my drone or my RC airplane have to have a system that both transmit and receives? Because the actual aircraft doesn't really require that either.
Right. Well, that's like I said, that's only for the standard that they have to have that. But the point that I was kind of getting at was when they brought that system on board, they didn't write the rules for using that system 8 years before they released it. Or you know what I mean? They had it, so it took some time so they could the technology came out.
They did. That's not true. The FAA for ADSB for general aviation and aviation in general came out about 5 or 6 years ago. And they basically said at the end of 2019, December 31st, 2019, no airplane that's in the air will be allowed to fly in controlled airspace without ADSB. So everybody had to go out and buy these ADSB products. Now, the problem is that initially 5 years ago, they wanted people to do it. They offered a rebate for people that went out and did it. Garmin was the only one that had it, and it was about $8,000 to get that put in your airplane.
Right.
And then people like me, I was like, my airplane, I'm not spending $8,000 to put the system in there that I don't need, right? Because I have a different type of aircraft. And some of us, had airplanes that we really don't need $8,000 worth of that. I don't want it in, out, so I can see everybody. I just want them not to hit me. So once again, in this particular fashion, they put the law into place, but they gave us 5 years to get it figured out. And in that 5-year time frame, technology kept coming out, creating better and better and cheaper ADS-B units, to where when I finally pulled the trigger on mine, it only cost me about, $2,000 for the unit, and then another, $3,500 to install it or whatever. But it's, well, I mean, there was a lot of time invested in it, and there was some other stuff. But what I'm saying is that it's not a 3-year time frame. It was 5 years, right? And the ADS-B is only required inside controlled airspace. So if I lived out in the desert in the middle of, Arizona,
like where you
California,
live now, out in the
Nevada,
desert,
and I'm not in controlled airspace, I really don't have to have it.
Right.
So once again, we're getting to the point now. I will tell you, because Mike asked me earlier, that in this particular case, it says specifically that drones will not be able to use the ADS-B systems, because right now they have a list. There's, let's say, 200,000 aircraft using ADS-B. If there were now added 4 million unidentified guys, it basically would dump the system, because the system can barely keep up with the airplanes in the air, what it's doing now. So they have specifically required something other than ADS-B, because it would blank out the system. You would basically see nothing but a dark cloud over the U.S. because 4 million drones all in the air, plus a couple of 100,000 airplanes. Now it's just solid, and you can't tell where anybody is, because it's, they're everywhere. If that answers your question, Mike, I know you had something earlier.
Well, what I'd like to say is I don't understand why they couldn't implement something very similar to ADS-B on a different freak, but with this, basically just change the freak, and that's it. And then it would be available for everybody that flies. I mean, that would be a reasonable solution, but I don't know.
But that technology, I don't know if it's available yet or not.
We were just talking about swapping out the frequency. That's it. And all the other stuff stays in play. The protocol stays in play. It's just a different frequency. And you wouldn't overload the manned airplane space, because it'd be on a different frequency. So why wouldn't they be able to do that?
I don't know, other than the fact that the ADS-B equipment that I have in there requires what they call a WASH GPS, which is a ground-based GPS, air-based GPS, plus an identifier. So the whole thing weighs about 8 pounds. And the box is about the size of a shoebox, to put. So, I mean, the equipment, it's not miniature. It's not like I could take a postage stamp, which is really what I need for my foamy. Once again, the rule that they're talking about and all of the information that they're saying and the cost associated with it, that's all projections, right? Those are this is proposed. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're taking what we have currently today and making that the issue. This is a proposal for systems that need to be put in place for this rule to become active. And that is a big issue, because you're making a rule based on technology that is not around yet, even though there's some of it around, but it's not totally, we don't know who the FAA qualified remote ID USS, whatever they call that, where it's the unmanned systems surveillance or whatever. Those don't exist right now. They're being put, this rule is being put into place so that those will be developed. And that, I think, is ultimately the wrong road to go down, because I don't think you can write a rule based on technology that's not here but coming in 5 years, because in 5 years, the technology that they're proposing is going to be 10 times better, worse, who knows? I mean, look at cell phones when we were kids, we didn't even have any. And then all of a sudden now we're talking to each other on our cell phone. It was the Jetsons back when I was a kid watching that, going, hey, man, you can talk on your watch or whatever. And now you can actually do it. And it was only 30 years ago.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I kind of summing up, I guess, with all of this. Listen, folks, get out, do a little bit of, review on your own, look at a couple of groups, watch some more videos. Get out, talk to your congressmen, your representatives, let them know that you are not happy if you're not happy, and, let's make a little noise. That's what the bottom line with all this stuff is.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think if you haven't made a comment, don't just log onto the website and say, "Hey, look, this is stupid."
This is stupid.
That's not a
This
comment
sucks.
that the FAA will take as a comment. You need to express, some valid concerns. And I think the biggest one is the cost, because their little cost breakdown over the 10-year time frame that says it's going to cost the government $76 to fund
Yeah,
this
because
whole
we have
thing.
to pay for the rest of it.
Yeah,
So we're going to be paying
that's
for the rest of it.
unrealistic. It's unrealistic, and it's over a 10-year time frame when they want this, integrated within 3 years. So that to me is kind of a misrepresentation of the cost. I mean, I have thousands of dollars tied up in RC hobby, and doing this and registering every single one of my airplanes. Some of these I would have to destroy because they're going to be too small for this stuff, and I can't fly them anymore, and it's just ridiculous. So make a comment, make it legible, talk to the people in either the AMA or the EAA or whoever else you're involved with, but get out there. Like I said, the 5,000 comments, this should be well into the millions of comments. So if you haven't made one, take some time, go out there and do it. Unfortunately, our hour is up.
Yeah, our hour's up. But at least with a couple of sites, like I said, they have a few talking points. So you can even make it easy on yourself. You can look at a few of the talking points that you agree with, pull them off, maybe expound a little bit upon it. It shouldn't take you more than, 10, 15 minutes to write up a little letter and then, pop it off, folks. So, this is really going to be important.
I will tell you, though, that I was not, when I did mine, I wasn't really happy with the way it worked because you can submit a formal comment from the Federal Register, but the amount of information that they are collecting on you is horrendous. They wanted my name, my birthday, my social security number. I mean, they wanted so much information, and I don't even know if I got mine published because I didn't fill all that out. I was like, you don't need to know who, you don't need to know my birthday and where I lived and how many planes I have and all that kind of crap. That's just information gathering in my particular case that, that they're going to be like, oh, we're going to go to this guy's house, right? Because he's got all these airplanes and we didn't see him register but one of them. So now it's a knock on the door and, now they want to see everything, which once again,
Fill
is
your
my
papers. Fill your papers,
So-
Mr. Moan.
Well, the good news is we do have other groups that are trying to get involved with this, and I'm hoping that this gets taken on fairly soon because I think there's enough lawyers in the RC world and enough people that they can read through this document and see some of the major flaws. And there's got to be a way that we can all be happy and come together and stay safe and yet keep the world going and not busting up my hobby.
Well, I don't want to bring this back to any further conversation because we've got to wrap it up. But it just seems to me that the AMA has done a great job of keeping things safe for us at this point, and why we can't continue on that mode of operation where we have this organization that basically we're self-policing, and we've done I think a pretty damn good job of it. Why that model all of a sudden is broken? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and
Anyway,
I
that's
agree
it.
with you. The other problem that I feel is kind of troublesome as well is that the AMA, as much as they have done and as much input as they have given, and as many people that we have in this organization doing what we need to do, they have officially not been recognized as a club, as a group, as a, they're not, nowhere in this document does it say, oh, the AMA is where everyone needs to go. They have not released who is going to be part of this group of flying, whether every AMA site is going to be one of the, what'd you call it? The FRIAs or whatever.
Yeah, the FRIAs.
None of that. And they should have looked at us and said, oh, well, you guys do a great job. If you join the AMA, exempt from all this stuff. But they didn't do that. And this is what I fear. I fear that the AMA is working their butts off to try and, get into this and to get a handle on it. And typical government, they will just ignore what the AMA says and go, well, we know better. And you're just trying to get around, obeying this law. And so they're going to pretty much disregard everything that the AMA says. And that's my biggest fear. So hopefully that won't happen. But I think that the privacy thing is probably gonna be what, when somebody finally figures it out, they're gonna be, this is how they open that can, right? You're gonna open the can of worms with the whole privacy thing. And once you start doing that, we get up to the Supreme Court for, that they're spying on us or collecting data. I think this whole thing is in a bad way. That's the best way I could put it.
Good.
Hopefully it goes down in flames, but whatever. Well,
exactly.
I can't believe it. We're obviously passionate about this. We're passing it along. If you have comments or you liked or didn't like what we were talking about, jump on our Facebook listeners group. It is the Park Flyer Podcast listeners group on Facebook. Kudos to some new members. I saw that we had some new members join this week. So welcome to you guys. Or you can send us an email at theparkflyerpodcast@gmail.com. All three of the hosts get it, so I'm sure somebody will respond to you relatively quickly. And let us know what you think. We're always interested in your comments, so feel free to comment on our website on this particular episode, or one of the other two ways.
Heck yeah.
Perfect. Well, anything in the future for you guys flying this week at all? Winter Warbirds is coming up for me, and then Electric Festival right after that.
Nope. I've been kind of tied up with family stuff, unfortunately, so nothing for me.
And the weather up here isn't that great either. It's been not fantastic.
Okay, well, it gives you time to kind of peruse through and read some more of this FAA proposed rulemaking if Mike can stay awake.
Well, no more for me. I'm just gonna, my blood pressure's getting high enough, so I'm gonna have to go do something fun.
Jay's gotta, you gotta do something fun. So,
Jay, why are you taking that big horse pill? What's that for?
Blood pressure. That's funny. All right. Well, make sure you comment on or before March 2nd, 2020.
March 2nd.
Comments close then. It is definitely the remote identification of unmanned aerial systems. And tell us what you think. But we appreciate you listening to us. Check out our new website if you feel the need, and we would appreciate it. There is a donate button. You can send us some funds via PayPal. And if you have a topic or anything you want to hear about, let us know that as well. So I don't know. I guess that wraps it up for this week.
Heck yeah.
All right. Well, for Michael from Arizona.
And Jay from the hills of Texas.
And AK Mike in Texas.
We will see you in 2 weeks.
Let's fly.
You have been listening to the Park Flyer Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your next visit. Please give our show a star rating and review, and feel free to email us your questions, topics, or suggestions to parkflyerpodcast@gmail.com.